Hey YouTubers, I want to talk a little bit today about the fact that I almost got arrested yesterday. I went to court for my electric bike trial for having no insurance and no registration and no title for my electric bike that goes less than 20 miles an hour. I presented my evidence. I was confident. I exposed some perjury that the two police officers were engaged in, who were there to testify against me. And I did catch the judge himself on a lie. And I was summarily charged with criminal contempt of court. Now, some of you may say, well, that doesn't sound too bad. Well, no, it sounds worse than it actually is. But there's a couple of truths here that I want to focus on. One, when you go into a courtroom, you really don't have any rights, because basically all I did was accuse the court of being less than honorable. Now, if you know anything about the legal system, the primary purpose, the primary concern of the court is to preserve its own credibility. The court will gladly destroy your life to preserve its own credibility. It's kind of one of those big lies, you know. It's like it's like when the mob comes to your restaurant, demands money, you know, or they want to eat at your place. You sit there and you tell them how wonderful they are. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, you're like, man, those people are corrupt. But of course, if they hear you say that they're corrupt, they're going to kill you. The same truth holds in, for example, if you look back in the Middle Ages. And this is kind of what a court actually is. It is the place of the king. The judge is the king. The judge is the representative of the state, just as in the Middle Ages, a king was the representative of God. Now, the bailiff, the stenographer, the prosecutor, all of those are attendees of the court. They're attendees. When you walk into the court, just like when you would walk into the court of a king, you were supposed to lower your eyes, you were supposed to fall on your knees, you were supposed to grovel, you were supposed to say, you know, tell the king how wonderful he was, and then, you know, when the king said, well, thank you for your prayers, but I'm still, you know, gonna sell your daughter into slavery and take your last cow, you know, you were supposed to say to the king, oh, thank you, most merciful, blah, 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 blah. I did not do that yesterday in court. I was confident, I was bold, I was honest, I was truthful, I allowed myself to be my true self, which is an enlightened being, at least becoming enlightened. They didn't like that too much. But of course, you know, they don't like being accused of anything. And what's funny is, usually when I would go to court, I would grovel. And I would feel like complete crap afterwards. Yesterday, I stood up for myself. I had all the evidence. And I called them on their bullshit. And even though I have to go back to court in a month or so to be, you know, the judge basically said, if you apologize to the police officers for calling them, you know, perjurers, if you apologize to the police officers, then, you know, after you apologize, we'll decide if you're going to be found in criminal contempt, which carries a fine and jail time. It's rather amusing that, you know, the state cannot like something you say, and freedom of speech does not exist in a court. That's another point I'd like to make. When they were calling up the defendant, there were several cases in that courtroom, and then when they were calling up defendants, it was civilian so-and-so, civilian so-and-so. The only reason you call somebody a civilian is if you're in a military court and you want to differentiate between those in the military and those not in the military. And of course, it was a flag in there with gold fringe around it. And in a military court, there is no such thing as the Constitution. There is no such thing as freedom of speech. There is no such thing as innocent before proven guilty. There is just whatever the fucking judge wants to do to you. And everything else is based on hearsay. And so basically I had all the information. Gave it to him. Also, the whole incident, the electric bike thing, hasn't even been decided. It's still up in the air. They never came to a determination. And I know one thing that the judge did not like was me telling him that I was going to go over because there were two sets of laws. The cop had one set of laws that said an electric bike was, such and such. I had another set of laws both sets of laws were from the state. And I was like, wait a minute, there's no dates on these. How do we know what the law is? We don't know the law. And the judge got pissed off at that because the judge was like trying to say that the cops knew the law. And it was obvious from the cop testimony that the cops didn't know what the fuck they were talking about. And I told the judge, I said, you know what, next week I'm going to go talk to the members of the State Transportation Committee who create these laws in regards to transportation and vehicles and etc. And I'm going to figure out what the law is. Then I'm going to come back, when I'm supposed to, and I'm going to have more evidence. I felt really good when I left that courtroom. I felt incredibly good. And they did actually at one point have me in cuffs, which was kind of silly. I was taken to a little room, and the private detective started, talking, trying to lecture me, trying to be the, the big brotherly type, right? Which is fine. I get that. And he said, you were arrogant. And I said, well, I guess the judge mistook my confidence for arrogance. And the private detective was like, this is no place to be confident. And really, that's kind of how it is. Because, just like in the Middle Ages, when you went into a king's court, if you were confident, if you stood up straight and tall, if you maintained eye contact, and you said, hey, king, you're fucking full of shit because you're unethical, the king had two choices. Have you killed right there on the spot, or imprison you for the rest of your life. And basically that's their goal, because they have to preserve the credibility of the court. It's not about justice, it's not about honesty, it's not about honor. It's about them looking good and getting the money that they demand. That's all it is, and they also want control. Now you might say, well, Spike, you're not very enlightened if you piss off a judge. Well, no, I am actually. I could consider myself enlightened because I look throughout history, and while I'm not comparing myself to these people, there is some marked similarities in that. For example, Socrates was a great philosopher. He had to go to trial several times. Eventually, they sentenced him to death. He drank hemlock. Jesus went before the judges, or whatever they were called back then, several times, and eventually they killed him. Buddha, I believe he had to undergo a couple of trials like that. Gandhi is another famous one. Gandhi was murdered. Martin Luther King Jr., same thing. He stood up against the state and he was murdered. All of these people spoke the truth. All of them spoke truth to power. Power does not like that. But if they stuck to their principles, which they did, and they felt good, because I stuck with my principles yesterday, and even though the outcome was less than perfect, I felt good. I felt calm. I felt at peace. I felt at one with the universe because I upheld my values. I upheld my principles.